طيب خير. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Habib. Habib. Abdul Latif. Sabir. I'm getting the names. I'm getting older. We're going to discuss it now, inshallah. طيب. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Before we resume the explanation of the material from this work, Bulug Maram, we want to shift, if we can, towards the important and pertinent aspects of the communal affairs. And that is the issue concerning the scheduling and the timing of the class. Because of daylight saving time, the class was shifted and adjusted from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock so that there is not a great duration of time within the class that can become burdensome for some individuals at times. So the class was shifted from 10 to 11 to shorten the duration of the class. However, yet, the month of Ramadan is swiftly and quickly approaching us. Inshallah ta'ala, Allah make us from amongst those that attain that month, that reach that month, that benefit from that month, and that exit from that month clean and cleansed of our sins, closer to Allah Azza wa Jal, and written from amongst those that will be the inhabitants and occupants of the Jannah. Ameen. During the month of Ramadan, I want to shift the timing of the classes. They will still be on Sundays, as this is the common day. All of the classes that I have given here thus far have been on Sunday. So we will try to keep it on Sunday. However, being that the energy level and the focus of individuals during the fasting can vary, I'm looking for a time frame that I believe is going to be munasib, relative according to the condition of the people. At this particular time of the day, for individuals that are fasting, this may lengthen and increase their normal activities, and it may be draining for them. Keeping that in mind, I'm seeking to move the time of the class to 1 hour before the breaking of the fast. And that is because from previous experience, holding classes at that time does not take away from the fasting person's schedule. Whether they are in the house preparing their meals, they can join online with the YouTube. If the individuals are within the community confines and they're getting ready to break the fast, the class is readily here available for you. And for others that have not been able to partake and benefit from the classes as well. As far as after Maghrib, everybody's busy eating and catering to their affairs, preparing for the nighttime salat, preparing for Isha and the nighttime salat. So I think it's relative. I think it's conducive. This is just my opinion and position. I don't know if there's any alteration, comments, suggestions concerning that particular adjustment. I'm open to it. But during that particular month of Ramadan, all of the classes, the 4 classes for those 4 weeks, quite possibly the last one, depending on the activities of the masjid. We know people start to spend the night in the masjid. They want people more focused on other affairs. They may ask for that class to be canceled. Or I may suggest it's moving towards that particular direction Give the people that opportunity. Let's cancel the fourth and final class of the month of Ramadan, and that's subject. But as far as right now, the classes will still continue on Sunday for the month of Ramadan, and they will be 1 hour prior to the breaking of the fast. If there's any, at this time, if there's anything of comment, suggestion, then we could entertain it. If not, then we would move forward with it. I'm still open to consideration as far as the time frame. No. So maybe what we'll do is, no, the ma'ruf. This is known and this is understood. Maybe the seating arrangement on our side can adjust or shift, whether the individuals like to move the tables to the side, we adjust in some form of fashion. This is something that we could accommodate at the same time. As when it comes to the teaching, there's no specific manner of the students and the teacher. There is something that is dictated by the Sunnah. The Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, he sat close in proximity to Jibril in terms of learning the Quran, rehearsing the Quran. So in terms of proximity, this is something that is addressed in terms of the nusus, in terms of text. In terms of the teacher or the students standing, sitting in a chair, sitting on the floor, this is something that has flexibility. The teacher could stand, the teacher could sit in the chair, the teacher could sit on the floor. The students could sit in the chair, the students could sit on the floor. This is something that has flexibility and leeway. So we'll carry over that notion during the month of Ramadan as well. As if anybody feels comfortable at this junction and say, I want to give myself some type of relief and break from the chair and the seat, it's hard. I want to sit on the floor and be able to stretch my legs. You could do so without any harm. It is not the protocol of this class that you have to sit at the desk and you have to sit in a chair. You do as you will, you do as you feel comfortable. As when I came to resume these classes during the interim of the other teacher, I told the administration, leave everything as is. I don't want to come in and change anything. Leave everything as far as day timing. If they want to eat, let them eat. If they want to drink, let them drink. As we move forward, if things need to be addressed, we'll address them along the way, need be. Other than that, leave things as they are, inshallah ta'ala. So moving forward, inshallah ta'ala, the class will be on Sunday as normal, but 1 hour prior to the breaking of the fast. So as the days start to change in terms of the breaking of the fast, keep in mind we're also going to move and shift with that, because that 1 hour time frame by clock is not going to stay the same from the first of the month of Ramadan to the 28th, 29th, or 30th of the month of Ramadan. With that being said, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to shift back to review from the first hadith up until our last hadith, whether you count it as the fifth or you count it as the fourth. We're going to review. And then, inshallah ta'ala, with the time allotted, we're going to continue and move forward with the next hadith. The very first hadith, the hadith of who is the Rawi. The Rawi means the narrator. Who does Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, present as the narrator of the first hadith? Abu Hurairah, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, as is well known and commonly understood by the general Muslim. This is how this particular companion is known and identified, by his kunya. He's known and identified by his kunya, Abu Hurairah. However, we've mentioned something of a brief biography of this particular rawi, of this particular narrator of hadith, concerning the differences amongst the people of knowledge concerning his name. He is known as Abu Hurairah, but that is not his name. I may be known as Abu Layla, but that is not my name. For the most part, people from uh, how would we say, New York know me by one identification, and people from New Jersey know me from a different identification. So based off of what I commonly hear from an individual, I know where they know me from for the most part. However, this particular companion, his name is differed over by the people of knowledge. Sheikh Fawzan mentions that there are some 30 different references or opinions concerning his name. What are some of those differences? If not, what is presumed most likely to be his name? Abdullah, Abdullahi ibn Sakhra, Abdullahi ibn Sakhra. Naam. And some, as Sheikh Fawzan mentioned, say that instead of Abdullah, it is Abdul Rahman or Abdul Rahim. It varies and it fluctuates. However, this particular companion, this rawi of this hadith, Abu Hurairah, he mentions that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned concerning the water of the ocean, huwa tuhuru ma'um al-hillu maytatu, that the water of the ocean is tahur, it is pure within itself, and it purifies other than itself, and that is deceased, ma la ya'ish illa fi, that which does not live except inside of the ocean is halal, is deceased, is halal. We mentioned concerning the takhrij as presented by Ibn Hajar, akhrajahu al-arba'ah. This narration is collected and extracted from amongst four compilers of hadith. With Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, this terminology refers to four specific collectors of hadith. Does anyone remember or can reference these four compilers or collectors of hadith? Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, Nisa'i, and Ibn Majah. These are the four. And it's preferable to keep these four in this particular order, arrangement, or sequence. Abu Dawood to be mentioned first, At-Tirmidhi to be mentioned second, and Nasa'i to be mentioned third, and Ibn Majah to be mentioned fourth, and the final. He continues and he mentions Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, wa Ibn Abi Shaybah, wallahdu lahu. Ibn Abi Shaybah has also collected this particular narration, and that is the wording of his narration. As this narration is collected, as noted by Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah, when you go to their particular narration of this hadith, you will find that the wording is going to vary and fluctuate. They are not all that are listed that have collected this hadith of Abu Hurairah going to have the exact wording mi'a bi mi'a, 100%. Min al-bidaya ila al-nihaya, from beginning to end. This is not the case. This is why Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he's mentioning, wa Ibn Abi Shayba, he has also collected this narration, wallahdu lahu, and he's turning your attention to that. This is the wording of the narration collected by Ibn Abi Shayba. This wording has been chosen by Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, due to its conciseness, its clarity, and the specificness of the wording. In the specificness of the wording itself, it tells you concerning the water of the ocean, huwa tuhuru ma'uhu. It's clear and concise. Its water is tuhur. Al-hillu maytatu. It's dead and deceased, it's permissible, it's halal for you. This wording, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, by what is noted in the introduction, his goal was to present that which was the most concise and clearest to prove the point and position. He's choosing throughout all of the works of hadith the narrations that are the clearest and they are the most choice of all of the narrations that will clarify to you the issue at hand. Concerning the purity of water, despite the narration being also collected, the same narration being collected by Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah, the wording Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala has chosen is the wording of Ibn Abi Shayba, because that wording is clearer and is more concise to specifically explain to you the purity of the water of the ocean. Do the other narrations collected by Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and others explain that as well? Yes, they do. But from the mind frame and position and focus and understanding of Ibn Hajar, the wording of Ibn Abi Shayba is best. It is the choicest of all of the narrations that he has mentioned to prove the point concerning the purity of the water of the ocean. طيب. Al-Hadith al-Thani, the second hadith, the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, radiyallahu ta'ala an. Again, we gave a very short, brief biography concerning this companion. As we have here again, the first companion identified, commonly, famously known by his kunya. The second narrator, Abu Sa'id, another kunya, known by his kunya as well, more so than his name. However, we mentioned his name. Can anyone recall what his name was? What is the name of the narrator of the second hadith? The narrator is the Rawi. The narrator of this hadith is Abu Sa'id. عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله تعالى عنهم قال رسول الله, to the end of the narration. Abu Sa'id is known famously and commonly by kunya. This individual is known by his kunya. If you say Abu Hurairah, you say, who is that? We know who it is, even though it's a kunya. It's referring to one companion. When we say Abu Sa'id, we don't say, who is that? We know it's referring to one companion. However, behind scenes, the backdrop of who is Abu Hurairah, what's his name? The backdrop of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, what's his name? This is what is being sought. What is the name of this particular companion? Not Sa'id. Sa'ad. Sa'ad ibn Malik ibn Sinan. Boom. Khalas. You could continue and move forward. You could continue and move forward in front of brief biography and lineage. If you say, An Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, Sa'ad ibn Malik ibn Sinan, we say, okay, we definitely know who you are talking about. It would almost be a no-brainer once you said Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. However, this further detail lets us know more about who this particular companion is. With this narration, the narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ. This narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he tells us, the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, has said, Inna al-ma'a tahur. Indeed, certainly, water is tahur. This same description is the description that was given in the first hadith, the hadith of Abu Hurairah. This description of the water of the ocean. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, in his narration, he's saying that the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, is now saying, Inna al-ma, water in general. This is not specific to any particular class or type of water. This is generalizing anything that could be identified as water. So if you look at it at the end of the day, regardless of its origin or its locale, where it is in the earth, if you look at it and view it as water, the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri gives you its ruling and understanding. Innal ma'a tuhur. That water is pure within itself, and it purifies other than itself. La yunajjisuhu shay. He continues and he gives us more clarity that is not given in the first hadith, the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. That additional clarity is la yunajjisuhu shay, that it is not made impure by anything. It's a general ruling that pure water cannot be made impure by anything. At this particular stage, we're just laying the foundation, step after step. So far, does this mean that this is the final outcome of where we are going with these narrations? No, it does not. But we're building an understanding of how the conversation of water will transpire, how it's going to play itself out. So this hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, it transitions now from the basis of water, letting us know more about its qualities. It cannot be made impure by anything in general. And this is why, concerning the explanation of this narration, Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَمِنَ الْمَعْلُومِ, and what is well known and understood, هَذَا الْعُمُومِ, that this generality in the narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, غَيْرُ مُرَادٍ بِلَا شَكٍ, that this is not intended without any doubt. The generality inside of the narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that water cannot be made impure by anything. Shaykh Uthaymeen says that this generality is not to be held upon this generality without further discussion. He's letting you know that this generality, what is well known is that this generality is not intended in the total discussion. That narration has a discussion, but it's part of a bigger discussion concerning water. It's only the second narration of more than a handful of narrations that will follow, that will continue to explain in detail the conversation concerning water itself. So this narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala an, where he's mentioning that the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam has said that indeed water is tuhur, water is pure. La yunajjisuhu shay, nothing will make it impure. That position is general. That position is general. That generality, when you move on to the next hadith, whether you view the next hadith as one or whether you view it as two, the next hadith is going to now specify what is in the general narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, and is going to rule over it. The next hadith, the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili, radiyallahu ta'ala an, where the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Inna al-ma la yunajjisuhu shay, that indeed water will not be made impure by anything. Illa ma ghalaba ala rihihi, aw wa ta'mihi wa lawnihi, that indeed water will not be made impure. Because from the previous narrations, we already know what is the basis and classification of water. It's tahur. So even thus far with the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili, even though he's not specifically mentioning innal ma'a tahur, we already know that that is a characteristic of the water. It does not always have to be reiterated or uttered every time you mention water. We understand the classification of water is basis, is tuhur. So he's mentioning innal ma la yunajjisuhu shay, that indeed water, nothing will make it impure. This statement up until this far resembles the statement of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. However, it continues and it gives us more detail and explanation. As the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, it gives you more detail and explanation of the hadith of Abu Hurairah. The third hadith, the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili, gives you more detail and explanation than the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. So you see from the first hadith, we have a general basis. The water of the ocean is pure. The second hadith built on top of that, the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, indeed water is pure, nothing makes it impure. We have more information. Now we move to the third narration, or the third and the fourth narration. Indeed, water is not made impure by anything except when it is overcome and overwhelmed. And it's overcome and it's overwhelmed in its scent or smell, and its taste, and its color. That's the narration of Ibn Majah from the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili. That narration, by its specific wording, that which is mantuq, that which the narration speaks and tells you itself, you have to have all three qualities altogether overwhelmed. Indeed, water is not made impure by anything except that which overcomes or overwhelms its taste or its scent or smell, and its taste and its color. At this point, we are starting to get qualities and descriptions of what we're looking for in terms of the water being overwhelmed. Taste, color, smell. This specific narration in its wording tells you all of them have to be together. The next narration after that, from the narration of Abu Umama al-Bahili, it tells you al-ma at-tuhur illa in taghayyara, that indeed water is tahur. Where have we heard this before? From the hadith of Abu Hurairah. We've also heard this from the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. We're hearing it again in the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili from the narration of al-Bayhaqi. Al-ma tahur la yunajjisuhu shay illa except in taghayyara. This wording of the narration of al-Bayhaqi is explaining the overcoming and the overwhelming of the narration of Ibn Majah. When you look at the narration of Abu Umama al-Bahili, the first wording of the narration by Ibn Majah mentions, except if the water is overcome or overtaken, you may say overwhelmed, and it mentions taste, color, and smell. The overcome, the overtaking of the water, or the overwhelming of the water, is further explained by the narration of al-Bayhaqi. Illa in taghayyara, it has to change. There are possibilities with water and impurities. They could encounter one another and then be separated. It's possible, as is going to come. They could encounter one another and mix, and there's no change. There could just be mere encounter and mere change. This is going to come when we deal with the narration of the licking of the dog. It does not have to change the taste, color, or smell of the water. the mere encounter of the licking of the dog is sufficient. Now, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi. Now, the sister is mentioning the affair of what has previously been mentioned concerning the affair of a lake, or I'm adding to her statement at this time. She mentioned the lake. I'm adding and going back to what was referred to also, as well as a pond or a swamp. These are various descriptions of water that is sitting stagnant. And I'm recalling and adding these additional references because we don't want individuals to make distinction and separations and say that a pond is a body of water that's stagnant, it doesn't move, but it's clear water. And a swamp is a body of water that doesn't move, but it's infused with other articles and other objects, whether they are natural and whatever it may be, but the two of them by appearance are not the same. So we're going to give them different rulings. We say, no, this is not the case. Water that is sitting stagnant, that's clear. Water that is sitting stagnant and is cloudy or is infused with moss, is infused with other growth from the trees that have fallen inside of it that are now starting to, if we would say, mutate or vegetate on their own inside of the water. They all take the same ruling. A pond, a lake, a swamp. Stagnant water, water that is not moving. Again, and that ties back to the initial statement that anything that is identified as water, its ruling comes from the very first hadith. Or the second hadith, the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. Inna al-ma'a tuhur. If you look at it and it's a body of water and it's stagnant and you label it as a lake. Inna al-ma'a tuhur. It's tuhur. Whether you look at it and it's stagnant, it's a body of water, and we say now that's the pond. It's real small. Inna al-ma'a tuhur. Indeed, water is pure. Whether we look at it, it's a small body, it's a bigger body, it's swampy. Innal ma'a tuhur. Indeed, water is pure. If at the end of the day, you look at it and you identify it and classify it as water, its basic ruling is that it is tuhur. In order to negate that classification or that identity from the water, there has to be something that has now shifted and changed the water to remove that classification that's mentioned in the hadith. We're governed by narration, innal ma'a tuhur, that indeed water is pure. And the narrations, they govern us. And we go as far as the narrations, they take us. So when we find narrations are given to us, we govern ourselves with them. And then we say the narration is general. Then we go as far as the generality takes us. Then when we find there is some specificness that now restricts the narration, we move and we utilize the restriction as far as the restriction goes into the generality. So from the hadith of Abu Hurairah, from the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, we have the generality of water that it is tuhur. Now we're taking from the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili that there are aspects of the water that if they change, they remove the tuhuriyah, the purity of the water itself and its capability to purify. So when we look at the riwayah, when we look at the narration of Ibn Majah, the narration of Abu Umama al-Bahili, that indeed water cannot be made impure except if it is overcome or overwhelmed. That overcoming, that overwhelming is explained and detailed in the following narration, the narration of Al-Bayhaqi. Illa in taghayyara, except if it is changed. And what are we looking for in terms of, well, what's going to change? Illa in taghayyara rihahu, if the scent or smell of the water is changed. Illa in taghayyara rihuhu, aw ta'muhu, or its taste. Aw lawnuhu, or its color. Binajasatin, it tells you what is going to change the taste, the color, and the smell. It is going to be something of najasa, something of impurity, not something that is detested by the general human being, as far as snot, as far as an individual sneezing, as far as an individual that may vomit. Because the affair of the vomit is something that is of a difference amongst the people of knowledge concerning its impurity or not. But just the general affair of an individual sneezing, or an individual that may have coughed and some fluid may have come out of their mouth and entered the water. This is something that is detested. This is not something that is going to be classified as being impure. It's detested. It may be despicable, but as far as being impure, we would say, no, this is not the discussion. The changing of the water has to take place by something of najasa, something of impurity. That chapter is coming down the line. The chapter of the impurities, clarifying the impurities, is coming down the line, inshallah ta'ala. At that junction, you will have further clarity on how to now reference back to the categories of water to say it has changed it, it's impure, or that is something that is pure. It's not an issue or a conversation of the alteration or changing of the water. Now, repeat the question. Which animal? An animal that lives in the ocean. Tell you. Now, in terms of the wording of the narration itself, al-hillu maytatu is dead and deceased is permissible. Until there is a text that tells you that something is impermissible, it's going to be governed by the general principle that we mentioned from that verse from Surah Al-Baqarah. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. It is Allah Azza wa Jal that has created everything in the earth for you. Being that everything in this verse is being mentioned, it generalizes everything. That which is, hmm? No. By this verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, the 29th verse, هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. This does not mean impregnated within the earth. Like it has to be beneath the surface of the earth, but not on top of the earth. Likewise, this is not subject to that which is just on surface of the earth and not impregnated within the earth. We're talking about soil. Forget the issue of the water. Everything that is with the earth. In this situation, we are referring to that which is on top of the earth, that which is underneath the earth, that which is inside of the water, that which is in the scope of the earth itself. The air, the clouds, all of this is subjected for our use, for our benefit, as a bounty, a favor of Allah Azza wa Jal. He's recounting this favor. Huwa alladhi, that is referring to Allah Azza wa Jal. Huwa alladhi khalaqa lakum ma fil ardi jami'an. He has created it for you. The affair of khalq is one of the key components of rububiyyah. Huwa al-khaliq, al-malik, wa mudabbir. When you see these three categories, when you see these three qualities, even if it's just one, like the affair of water, even if it's just the affair of one of these qualities, khaliq, the creator, which necessitates creation. Malik, he owns. Something is owned. Mudabbir, he governs and administrates those affairs of what? That which is created. These are the three elements of rububiyyah. When we study aqidah, when we study tawheed, we look at the affair of tawheed being broken into three branches. Tawheedu rububiyyah, the tawheed of his rububiyyah means the oneness, the uniqueness, the completeness, the wholeness of rububiyyah, lordship. What does lordship mean? Lordship is given to one who creates, who owns, and who administers and governs the affairs. This is why when you look at the argument that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala positions inside of the Quran, drawing people back to his oneness, to his obedience, to his worship, he mentions the affairs of that which he alone, which is only capable by Allah Azza wa Jal to do, to create from nothing. Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in am humul khaliqun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this verse. Am humul khaliq, am humul, am hum, let me just mention the verse. Am hum khuliqu min ghayri shay'in. Were they created from nothing? Am humul khaliqun. Or are they the creators themselves? There's only one of two. If you're dealing with somebody that does not believe in the existence of Allah Azza wa Jalla, or the oneness, and they say, yeah, there's a creator, but he has partners. Am khuliqu min ghayri shay. Were they created from nothing? Where did we come from? There is a creator. There's creation, necessitates a creator. We're not patrons of the Big Bang Theory. Just came about by science and matter, and before you know it, there was an explosion and boom, creation came into existence. Or Darwin's theory that mankind came from apes or the likeness of such. Where did the apes come from? Let's give you another component. Where did that come from? Am khuliqu min ghayri shay. Did you just come out of nowhere? It leads you to the avenue. Ultimately, you came from a creator. And the person says, well, yeah, I identify with that. Am humul khaliqun. Did you create yourself? It's one of two. Am khuliqu min ghayri shay. The person just says, no, I came out of nowhere. I just came about on my own. Really? Where did everybody else come from? It necessitates the conversation of there is a creator. Am humul khaliqun. Or you're going to say, no, I created myself. That we know that this is a dead-end conversation for almost every individual. As if you tell the individual, they say, I don't believe in God. I've never seen God. Okay, intellectually now. I know you don't believe in the Quran. I won't argue with the verse of the Quran. I know you don't believe in the messenger. If you don't believe in the Quran, you don't believe in the man who came with the Quran. You don't believe in the sunnah of the messenger. These are proof and evidences for us. As Shaykh Uthaymeen mentioned, you have the affair of the Quran, you have the affair of the sunnah, you have the affair of the aql, you have the affair of the fitrah of an individual. They don't believe in the Quran and the sunnah. We'll argue with you intellectually. He says, I don't believe in the God, I don't believe in the creator. I can't see him. He doesn't exist. Whatever I can't see does not exist. I said, how do you think? I use my brain. You ever saw it? No. How you know it exists? So you're telling me you utilize something, you're arguing with me with something you've never seen. And it's your own. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ, as Allah mentioned in the Quran. His discussion is destroyed. It's made rendered vain and false. Not everything that you cannot see does not exist. So if you're dealing with individuals that if I can't see, I don't believe in it. You say, well, you've seen your brain. You think with your brain. You will acknowledge, every individual will say, yeah, I think with my brain. Where you get that? You're blind following everyone else. This is natural in this situation. You think with your brain. You've never seen your brain. But you believe that you have one. You have to give in now. That you believe in something you don't see, but you just say, I don't believe in nothing I don't see. From the intellectual side. Because he doesn't believe in the Quran, so he's going to say, I don't want to hear that. Doesn't believe in the Quran, he sure enough doesn't believe in the Sunnah. There are ways Allah tells us that we can argue and establish his oneness. But in this verse, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا, we're dealing with everything that is inside of the earth, on surface of the earth, flies within the atmosphere of the earth, وَهَكَذَا. It's not something that has to be solidly connected to just the sphere, if you would say, of the earth itself, وَهَكَذَا, and nothing else. Because these birds that fly throughout the sky and so forth like that, they are subjected to our usage. You are able to sell them. You're able to trade them. You're able to take them as pets, as long as you treat them kindly and so forth like this. They're subjected for your use. So that verse is utilized as the proof and evidence that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed to us is for our usage. I'm going to transition back. I lost line of thought. I get a little long-winded, mashallah. And I'll tell you where it comes from. It comes from my readings. A lot of my readings, my studies are here, home-based, if you would say. A lot of my readings are from the work of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. And likewise, his student Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, as Shaykh Uthaymeen mentioned, that when Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah talks about a subject, he gets long-winded. And these are the words that Shaykh Uthaymeen rahimahullah used to describe Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. He gets long-winded. That you will find with Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah that he will start with one particular subject and he will transverse through various topics and subjects and detail them to bring you back to the original discussion. So what happens is at times with myself, I will follow this same mind frame and pattern. And in giving you a topic or a discussion, start detailing particular affairs that through the midst of it, you would say, this has nothing to do with the initial conversation, but it's the explanation of the conversation. So sometimes hard coming back full circle, if you would say. But to go with the narration of Al-Bayhaqi, that narration explains the narration of Ibn Majah. And this is a common theme and practice of the people of knowledge in explaining the works that they tell you as sunnah tufassiru sunnah. that the Sunnah explains the Sunnah. The narration of Al-Bayhaqi is explained in the narration of Ibn Majah. When you say illa ma ghalaba, except that which is overcome or overwhelmed, it's explained by the narration of Al-Bayhaqi, illa in taghayyara, except if it changes. It doesn't have to be mere mix or encounter. And this is what I want to come back full circle to. There are possibilities in um, instances where impurities will encounter the water and they can be removed. Impurities can encounter the water and they can be removed, and that water stays upon its basis. So the narration of Al-Bayhaqi affords you the understanding that taghyir, taghayyur, it has to change. What changes? Taste, color, or smell. By what? Binajasatin, by something of impurities. Tahduthu fi, the occurrence and the change has to take place and transpire within the actual confines of the water itself. As mentioned by Shaykh Uthaymeen and others of the people of knowledge, if there is something of a scent that is stemming and emanating from something that is impure, a dead carcass, as the sister was mentioning, and it starts to affect or influence the smell of pure water, it is not being changed, even though it is a smell. It is not being changed by that which is occurring inside of the water. The impurity is from an external stance. It is not actually occurring, taking place, transpiring within the water itself. So this is very important. Taghyir binajasa tahduthu fi. A change by impurity occurring within the water itself. Is this clear, understood at this particular time? Tayyib. Going back to what the sister mentioned in terms of the creatures of the earth, now this is coming full circle again. Everything that is in the ocean, ma la ya'ishu fi, it is pure within itself. To exclude anything from that permissibility or that purity requires the text. So if an individual says that is the waste of an animal, wahakada, whatever the animal is, we would say it might be detested by an individual, it might be despised by an individual, but until there is text, we can't rule upon something with being impure. Everything is pure except that which has been made impure by text. This is going to surface again when we deal with the affairs of impurities. And why is that? In dealing with the affair of impurities, there are layers and levels to how the discussion will start to transcend. This is because we will be looking at the urine and the defecation, the waste matter of animals that are allowed to be eaten as opposed to animals that are not allowed to be eaten. There is a discussion amongst the people of knowledge. Now, so you. So you. So you. I'm going to reiterate what you mentioned for sake of recording for those that are not able to hear us online. The brother was mentioning the affair of what we're entertaining and discussing right now is concerning purification. the water that is changed by that which is pure, as far as dead fish or any animal that's living in the ocean and so forth. We may be able to utilize that water for purification, but maybe not necessarily for drinking and so forth. The discussion is, if it is viewed as water, its basic understanding is that it is tahur. It's pure within itself. That's the conversation of drinking, utilizing for cooking. Wahakada. Internal um, digestion, if we would say. And it's pure, it purifies other than itself. This would be the external application. We use it for wudu, we use it for ghusl, we use it to remove impurities. Wahakada. That water is permissible to drink unless there is harm in it, as you've mentioned. If there is harm in the drinking of the water due to bacteria, germs, something that will harm the health of the individual, this is a separate conversation. However, the water still does what? Remain tahur. Because now it is something that the individual looks at and says, it's a harm for me to drink or to digest or take internally, for whatever the situation may be, does not change the basic ruling of the water itself. And this is something that Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his explanation, he does address. That despite the water being pure, for purification, if we found that an individual said, I have some dislikeness for utilizing this water for drinking, we would not find any harm with them. If the nature of the person, he mentioned, if the nature of the person has dislikeness for it, then we would say, la bats, no problem with it. Except we would still hold the same ruling for the water. Just like when the Messenger of Allah والسلام, was presented with lizard meat to eat, and he abstained and refrained from it. And the companions, they gathered the conclusion that it's not permissible to eat. And he explained to them, it's not from the creatures, it's not from the meat or the food of my land. So I refrain from it. It's detestable to me. That is along the basis of this conversation as well. An individual, what you may find as being detestable concerning that water, maybe Abdulaziz doesn't. And then with myself, maybe I say, yeah, it's detestable. And then maybe Sabir, he says, no, it's not with me. The ruling of the water stays the same. The likeness of individuals will vary from individual to individual, whether they like it for personal usage and intake. But the ruling will still ultimately stay the same. The ruling is from Allah Azza wa Jal. The likeness and preference is individual, case by case. For internal intake, not for usage for purification now. We don't want you to carry that over and say, well, I don't like it for drinking and I don't like it for wudu. And say, that's not your conversation. That door is not accessible for you. The ruling is there. Your dislikeness is not going to now impede that ruling, even if it's temporarily. It's not going to change, alter, or shift it whatsoever. So now we have the first, the second, the third and fourth, or the third narration. We move to the next narration, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, the hadith that is famously known as Hadithul Qullatain, the hadith of the two qullah. And these are two earthen containers or vessels of water. As we've mentioned, very brief review, there is great discussion concerning the authenticity of the narration. And that is very important because, as is mentioned by the people of knowledge, the likeness of Shaykh Uthaymeen in his explanation of Usul al-Fiqh, that the individual that is looking at the hadith, he has to look at the hadith from two perspectives. We're looking at the hadith in terms of its soundness. Is the hadith authentic? Then we're looking at the hadith in terms of what is the understanding that is drawn from the hadith. What is the hadith telling us? What is it dictating to us? What is it governing us by? Concerning the soundness of the hadith, the authenticity of the hadith. The hadith al-Qullataini as a basis. In review, I will give you the statement of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. He mentioned, أكثر أهل العلم بالحديث يرون هذا الحديث حسن. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that the majority of the scholars of hadith, they hold this hadith to be hasan. In conclusion, what does that mean to us? It's sound. It's acceptable. It's just like the first hadith of Abu Hurairah. It's just like the second hadith of Abu Sa'id. It's not like the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili. Whether it's the narration of Ibn Majah or al-Bayhaqi, there is agreement amongst the scholars of hadith. Both those narrations are weak. But we utilize the consensus amongst the scholars that if water changes by taste or by smell or by color from something of impurity, that's najis, and that change takes place within the water, there is consensus amongst the scholars that water is impure. Regardless if it's above, if it's qullataini or above, or it's lesser than qullataini. That is a consensus amongst the scholars. If there is change, and this is very important, you must keep in mind, if there is change, I don't care how much water it is. It could be a fistful. It could be 4 handfuls. It could be 4,000 gallons. If all of it changes, it's najis. If it's 1 handful, if it changes, it's najis. If there is a change, throw the hadith of qullataini out the window. For right now, as you're learning, if you're saying, I'm going through the stages of understanding these narrations, and I'm seeing that there's a process, but I'm missing a stage, or a stage is a little hard or difficult for me to encompass, we would say, I'm going to give you a measuring stick. Govern yourself with this. The narration of al-Bayhaqi. The water is pure. That's your basis. Unless there is a change. And that change is one of the 3. Taste, color, or smell. If that change takes place within the water, there is consensus amongst the scholars. They will utilize the meaning of the narration. But focus and recollection and reference, you govern yourself with that narration. Understanding it's weak narration, but there is a tangible text for you to go back to and say, I utilize the meaning of that narration because the scholars are in agreement concerning what's entailed inside of it, but not the specific narration itself. So if the conversation is difficult, the narration of al-Bayhaqi, that's your default. It gives you the understanding of the basis of water, and it gives you with specificness what may change, how it may change, what is necessary to now rule upon the impurity of water. The only thing is, understand how far you're going to fall back on that narration. You're going to fall back on that narration in terms of its meaning. You're not going to present the narration as the proof. What are you going to present as the proof? The ijma, the consensus amongst the scholars. That if there is a change, and that change is not regulated or restricted by a particular amount. Oh, if it changes anything more than qullataini, it's najis, but anything less, it's not. No. That understanding is general. If there is any change, the water becomes impure. The hadith of qullataini gives you, by narration, measurement. We're dealing with quantity of water now. Not going to go too heavily into it, as there's difference amongst the people of knowledge concerning what is the specific amount of qullataini. There's no agreement amongst the scholars concerning what is the measurement of qullataini. That's something that we mentioned. I think we have mentioned, what was it, 29? We mentioned 29 plus somewhere along the lines. As far as what's mentioned here, they do give you a measurement. Take it with a grain of salt. There is no, by explanation and statement of the people of knowledge, there is no agreement amongst the scholars concerning the amount of qullataini. Yes, there is difference whether the hadith is authentic or not. When you shift and we say the hadith is authentic, those that look at it and say the hadith is authentic, they disagree over how much qullataini actually is. So take the amount with a grain of salt. What we want you to walk away with is that this narration distinguishes between a amount of water, what is considered to be an abundance of water, and what is considered to be a minute, small portion of water. And why is that? Because they say anything that is by narration, إذا بلغ الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث وفي رواية لم ينجس. You see now that the sunnah clarifies and explains the sunnah. The narration where it mentions لم ينجس, it does not become najis, explains the narration that mentions لم يحمل الخبث. It does not hold or contain any filth or anything that is detestable or despised, dirty, filthy, however you would like to explain it. It specifically tells you in one wording of the narration, lem yanjus, it will not become impure if the water is of this amount. You're saying, yeah, that's general. We will work with that. But we have something specific that tells us if there's a change, it becomes impure. And that's the consensus amongst the scholars. So the other understanding, this was from the mantuq. The narration told you, if you reach this amount, the water won't hold impurities. From the understanding, the mafhum of the narration, well, if it doesn't reach this amount, it's going to hold impurities. Lam yanjus, yanjus. It does become impure. And we say, no, wait a minute. That goes against that which is specifically mentioned in the hadith of Abu Sa'id. The hadith, the second hadith of Abu Sa'id, Inna al-ma'a tuhur, la yunajjisuhu shay. It doesn't matter. The hadith of Abu Hurairah, huwa tuhuru ma'u, al-hillu maytatu. The water is tuhur, is dead and deceased, is halal. The first portion of the narration, huwa tuhuru ma'u, its water is tuhur. We're dealing with the ocean. Did he mention which ocean? They vary in sizes, right? You go with the generality, right? We don't want to ask what type of cow, right? Right. MashaAllah. So when it comes to the text and the nusus, keep them general. Don't quantify, don't multiply, don't diversify. Just keep it general. Govern yourself with the text by what the text tells you as far as the text will take you, and then stop. There will be other texts that will come into play. As the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh, they mention, the majority of the texts of our religion are general. The majority of our texts, they're general. But they mention there is not a text that is general except that it's restricted. For the most part, that's the general rule of thumb. We would say, yes, the majority of the texts, they're general. But there are almost no texts except that they are restricted. So you'll go with the general principle. Govern yourself generally by what the text tells you. Don't make exception. Don't make restriction. Don't make something exclusive except by another text. So the hadith of Qullataini, it tells you by the understanding. If it doesn't reach this amount, if impurities encounter or touch it, even if there's no change, because the hadith didn't tell you it has to change. The understanding tells you if it went in, it became impure. But we say, wait a minute. That mafhum goes against that which is spoken by the hadith of Abu Sa'id. And this is why we suggested and we implored the individuals to take this benefit and also substitute it in your section of Usul al-Fiqh. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned, and I'm going to give you his statement here. وَالْعُلَمَاء يَقُولُونَ, and the scholars, they say, إِذَا تَعَارَضَتْ الدَّلَالَتَانِ الْمَنْطُقِيَّةِ وَالْمَفْهُومِيَّةِ فَإِنَّهُ يُقَدَّمْ الْمَنْطُوقِ. The scholars, they say, if there is conflict and there is clash between two pieces of evidence, one is based in that which is mantuq. It speaks to you. It's clear from the text. Aqimus salah. It tells you to pray. We don't have to look for another text and say, well, what is prayer? It tells you, establish the prayer. You don't have to examine and try to derive anything from the narration. Well, does it really want us to pray? Like, we're not going to look what kind of cow. Establish the prayer. The hadith is, the narration itself, the verse itself, it tells you, wa aqimus salah, establish the prayer. Mantuq. When you have a verse or you have a proof of evidence that is mantuqiyya, it's associated with that which is spoken to you. And then it clashes with another text now that is mafhumiyya. It's based in something of an understanding. From this understanding of the hadith of Qullataini, anything that doesn't reach this amount, it becomes impure. So that mafhumiyya, that understanding is clashing with the mantuq, the spoken part of the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. Shaykh Uthaymeen says, when you have this clash of mantuq and mafhum, فَإِنُّهُ يُقَدِّمْ الْمَنْطُوقِ, give precedence and give privilege and elevation to the affair of that which is mantuq. So we have from the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, there's a mafhum. If it doesn't reach Qullataini, the water becomes impure even if there's no change. We say, wait a minute. That goes against what's clearly spoken by the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. That we got a clash, a mafhum and a mantuq. This mafhum is going to be overruled by that which is spoken by the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. So what does that mean? If it doesn't reach Qullataini and impurity goes inside of it and it doesn't change, the hadith will tell you by its understanding that it's impure. The hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri will come behind it and say, now, even though I preceded you in this work, I'm following up and I'm correcting that understanding and letting you know I still remain pure. Give precedence to the mantuq. This is the affair of usul al-fiqh. But this is showing you, as we mentioned, when we were leading up to beginning this chapter, we gave you something from the science of hadith because its relevance was going to return. We tried to give you something from the affair of usul al-fiqh. Very little. We couldn't cover everything because it was going to return. This is from the affair of usul al-fiqh. To a degree, keep in mind, it is a book of hadith. But you have to have, at the same time, some understanding of usul al-fiqh. This affair, if you don't, for whatever the reason, if you don't grasp this affair of mantuq and mafhum, it's going to be very hard to differentiate between the discussion of water when it comes to measurement in abundance. And the scholars, he says, well, that's a small amount of water. What's small to me may not be small to you. No. With the scholars of fiqh, when it comes to water and they talk about a small measurement of water, it is going back to this hadith. Khalas. That's it. For the most part, our Islam, aqidatan wa fiqhan wa hadithan wa tafsiran, our Islam in general, regardless of your age in this masjid, regardless of your nationality, regardless of how long you've been Muslim, at this day and time, for the most part, your Islam is being molded and shaped by the knowledge that is coming from the scholars of Najd, Saudi Arabia. For the most part, there may be few exceptions. And this is not to say that that is a blame or that it's a blemish. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that in that particular region, there is a foothold to a particular madhab of fiqh. So what we're saying ultimately, when the person says, I didn't know what to do, I asked Sheikh bin Baz, I said, I already understand the line of fiqh. When it comes to water, with the hadith of qullataini, when you're dealing with measurements, we have some reference and we say, I understand where the discussion is going. I understand where it's rooted in. When we say now the issue of particular issues and affairs, just understanding it's not just dealing with water, and we're dealing with the salat, we're dealing with affairs of dress, wahakadha. That alignment of fiqh, the focus of fiqh. And again, this is not to reference any blame or to diminish it in any shape, form, or fashion. But what we're saying is that for the most part, your scope and vision of Islam, if it's knowledge based, it's from the realm of Najd. It's not coming from Pakistan, right? It's not coming from maybe Turkey. What we're saying is that with different, or Egypt, Shafi'i, a different alignment, different regions and locales were heavily affected and influenced by some of these great imams. With that being said, that which is going to be common amongst them is going to be something that's going to influence their society. So for us, to bring this conversation full circle now and to clarify, for us, a lot of our Islam is influenced by the scholars of Najd. When it comes to the affair of Qullataini, this is something that you're going to have to address. There may be few scholars that don't see it to be sound. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, doesn't view the hadith of Qullataini to be sahih. He says we have other nusus. The hadith of Abu Hurairah is authentic. The hadith of Abu Sa'id is authentic. The ijma' of the ulama is governing. He says, as for the hadith of Qullataini, فهو ضعيف. لا يقوم بها حاجة hujjah. It doesn't, the riwayah, لا يقوم بها hujjah. It doesn't establish any proof or evidence. There's no argumentation inside of it. بخلاف الشيخ الفوزان, as opposed to Sheikh Fawzan. ويقول هو حديث صحيح. Sheikh Fawzan said the hadith is sahih. So when you have scholars now, you're dealing with, I was in my bathroom and then I realized my son urinated in the water, in the bathtub and so forth like this. And then start realizing, for the most part, and they view it, this is lesser than Qullataini. Yanjus bi mujarradi malaqatin najasa. It becomes impure just by the mere encounter of impurities. So an individual will say, I have a different understanding concerning the hadith of Qullataini. It's going to be very hard to accept that position. Not so much refute the sheikh, but understand the line of thought. Because the Shaykh is being governed by the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you view that the hadith is not sahih, like Shaykh Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he said in his explanation, he said, we will explain it because it's material that's being presented to us. But he said there's no need for it because we have other proof and evidences that clearly detail for us the affair of water. And he mentioned with all the kalam concerning the hadith of Qullataini, the affair of having pure water for purification and removal impurities, this is something that is of great need to every Muslim. He said, if this was the case, this would have been clarified for us. This would not be such a mushkila. It would not be such an issue of indifference amongst us. Is the hadith authentic? Is the chain sound? Which wording is authentic? Of the narrations, how much is the measurement? And so forth. And he said this, and this is where he mentioned, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah mentioned there's about 16 different ways that he looks at this hadith as being da'if. And that's when he followed behind saying, and you know how Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah is, when he starts to talk about a subject, he's long-winded. He found 16 different avenues to say, this is why this hadith is da'if. This is why this hadith is da'if. This is why this hadith is da'if. وَهَكَذَا. Until he reached about 16 different points. But in conclusion, I'm not going to tell you how to hold this narration. But what I will say, because I understand the affair of our community, I understand the affair of our day and time, that most of this material, for the most part, is above our heads. And that's not to belittle anybody. That's just to say the life that we're living, this is our circumstance. A lot of this discussion is above our heads. So what do, Abu Layla? I will bring you back the narration of Al-Bayhaqi. For the person that just accepted Islam today, for the person that been in Islam 5-10 years that never got this discussion, take the narration of Al-Bayhaqi and move with it to govern yourself. So then they say, okay, yes, that's cool. But what about the hadith of Qullataini? Utilize the narration of Al-Bayhaqi to govern yourself with the hadith of Qullataini. That narration, if the water is Qullataini or greater, it mentions that the water will not become impure. We will say, yes, that is the case. But the narration of Al-Bayhaqi, the ijma of the scholars is there's unanimous agreement that if it does change, you have to go along with the change. So that side of the hadith of Qullataini now is no longer discussion for you, even if you just accepted Islam today. That which is understood from the narration, and you say, well, if it doesn't reach this amount, it's going to become impure. We will say, no, back with the narration of Al-Bayhaqi, it stays pure unless there's a change. And even though the hadith is da'if, we're going along with the consensus amongst the scholars. And you would also utilize the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that which is spoken. But if that was too much for the person, we would say, go with the consensus amongst the scholars. When there is change, water is impure. When there is no change, the water is pure. Go with the basis. If the elevated and advanced discussion concerning water is above you, you are accountable to what you do now. If you know that the basis of water is that it is pure, you stay with that until you can move with knowledge. If you're confused, understand that despite what texts are presented that you don't understand, you and I cannot shift or alter or differ with the consensus amongst the scholars. Your basis is that water is pure. The consensus is that if it's changed, it's impure. Both sides of the fence are discussed for you. If you're on the fence, and I would tell you, me, myself, studying these issues, being aware of these issues over a decade, I myself am on the fence concerning the authenticity of the hadith of Qullataini. I myself cannot tell you that hadith is authentic or not. Not based off my own level of knowledge, but just what is presented from the discussions of the people of knowledge. I myself have not found an exit from the discussion to say, no, it's authentic. No, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah was sound in that it is Hassan with the majority of people of knowledge, and that's what I hold. I can't tell you that. I can't follow behind Shaykh al-Taymiyyah, and I love the Shaykh, and say the hadith is da'if. I'm on the fence. I don't know. Despite that, I still know how to govern myself regardless of which measurement, which side of the fence the measurement is, whether it's qulatani or greater or lesser, because I have the hadith that are presented previously to it, and I have the consensus amongst the scholars that is presented in the discussion previous to it that exit me from both avenues of this hadith. Now,
If you say if you isolated somewhere and you only have like a bottle of water, but you need the water to drink, but you also have to make wudu. Can you make tayammum with water present, fearing that you might die first?
the question that's being presented for those that again can't hear for YouTube or recording purposes, if you only have a bottle of water and it is your only bottle for drinking, can you perform tayammum, being that you do have water present, but its main purpose at this situation in time is that is for drinking? This is something that we don't have a specific text that's going to govern you. If you only have a bottle of water and it will only suffice you for an hour, 2 hours, a specific distance of your journey, wahakada. In this situation, you're going to govern yourself with the general verse of the Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah Azza wa Jal as best as you are able to do. If you do this, you won't find yourself blameworthy. If you try to follow your desires and you say, you know what, I really don't want to perform wudu, I'm just going to perform tayammum, and I'm not going to entertain the discussion of, is there really water in close proximity to me? Is there water that is accessible? It's not so much we're in the masjid here. The brother says, I got 1 cup of water. Once I drink this, I have no water around me, nothing hands reach. I'm going to perform tayammum on the wall of the masjid. And we say the wudu station is downstairs. Or we say that there's a public bathroom across the street. Or we say that Sheikh Adam lives next door. These are situations that maybe somebody says, the brother Abdulaziz, he says, I can go with Adam. Sister Aida says, I'm not going in his house without my husband. She doesn't have water. He has water. He has water. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah Azza wa Jal as best as you are able to do so. There's no text that tells you if you only have water that will suffice you for drinking within an hour span, use it for your drinking, don't utilize it for wudu. You have to evaluate. You're a doctor, as Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, he mentioned, and the Sheikh Ashureka, he mentioned yesterday as well. Everybody is going to have to utilize their own understanding of themselves and their specific situation to analyze and to dictate which way to go. So what you may see in the same situation, you have 1 bottle and I have 1 bottle, we may have various outcomes. I might say, yes, I have to hold on to this water for drinking. I'm going to perform tayammum. You may say, no, that's not the case. I know where water is available. Wahakada. So when there's this issue, when we get there, this issue of tayammum, the basis, not the only reason, the basis is fuqdanul ma. There's an absence of water. Even though you have the presence physically of water, the condition at times may render that water void. Don't entertain this water in the discussion of my wudu now, because I need this for drinking. When you look at the condition of the sailors at sea in the first hadith, they mention, Inna narkabul bahr, and we ride at the sea. وَنَحْمِلُ مَعْنَا الْقَلِيلَ مِنَ الْمَاءِ. They mention that they ride at the sea and we hold only a scarce, a minute amount of water with us. إِن تَوَضَّعْنَا بِهِ عَطِشْنَا. If we utilize it for wudu, we become thirsty now. أَفَنَتَوَضَّعُ بِمَاءِ الْبَحْرِ. Should now we utilize the water of the ocean for wudu? That was the whole purpose behind the affair of the first hadith. There are 2 hadith up until this point we have not discussed the sabab, the reason behind the statement of the Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam. We have the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, and we have the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar Qullataini. Both of these narrations have a backdrop to them, a discussion to them, like the very first narration has. If you weren't aware, what I just mentioned to you tells you why the Messenger والسلام, responded to the affair of the ocean of the water, because he was asked about it. But there was a situation that was presented to him that brought about that statement. The hadith of Abu Sa'id, there's a situation behind it that brought about that statement. إِنَّ الْمَاءَ الطُّهُورُ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ. The hadith of Qullataini, there's a situation behind it. Why the Messenger of Allah والسلام, mentioned إِنَّ الْمَاءَ إِذَا بَلَغَ قُلَّتَيْنِ لَمْ يَحْمِلَ الْخَبَثِ. وفي رواية لَمْ يَنْجُسْ. That if water reaches the Qullataini, it does not become impure. It cannot hold impurities. We're going to, at some point, for the fawaid, for the benefit, to further drive home the understanding of the purity of water and the discussion in general, because it is enriching. When you understand the backdrop between the second hadith, the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, and you understand the backdrop between the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, hadith al-Qullataini, it gives you more understanding. It reinforces, and at the same time, because it's reinforcing and understanding, whatever is not aligned with it, it forces it to be dispelled. And what does that do for us? It starts to reshape our vision and understanding of how we see the sunnah when it comes to water. Because a lot of us may have had or may still have some misconceptions concerning the purity of water, what makes water impure, what is viewed as being impure, wahakada. Even with the affairs, I believe, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, when we get to the affairs of impurities and everything that is in between there, and how impurities in our general day in life, even amongst the spouses, can affect some of the mu'amalat, can affect some of the interaction and intermingling between the spouses. Based off of what? Based off of how an individual views something as being, whether it's pure or impure at the same time. Common practices of our society, wahakada, and likewise. But those affairs are going to come. The benefits inside of these chapters, they are very enlightening and they are very enriching, inshallah. I wanted to stop at this particular time. I thought at this time Sister Zainab was going to stop, but I think she's still upon the previous time frame at 10 and then leaving. She is. I thought she was leaving at this time, 11. That clock? That's not adjusted. Okay. I thought she was leaving a half an hour before Dhuhr for her class. That's why I had intended to stop now. Yes, 11:30 now. Oh, wow. This is one of the watches I didn't adjust. I'm not the Amir on the travels. I didn't. MashaAllah, Allah bless you to have several watches, but these are not these smart watches. These are the granddaddy watches. You got to physically change these yourself, MashaAllah. Okay. You have to ask Sheikh Adam.
That's the coffee machine, Jake. You drink coffee, you should know that sound. You should know that sound, Jake. I know, I'm thinking spooky, like.
You spooky?
Yeah, coffee spooky.
What are you scared of, Sheikh? MashaAllah. So there is material that I have prepared to present. I don't know if you want to stop now or if you want to continue. It's the next narration. Continue. نستمر. طيب. طيب. Going to, from this work, the fifth narration from the work that is translated. This is the translation of Dar es Salaam. The fifth narration narrated Abu Hurairah, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "None of you should take a bath in stagnant water while he is sexually impure." Muslim reported it. Al-Bukhari has, "None of you should urinate in stagnant water that is not flowing, then take a bath in it." Muslim has the words "from it," i.e., from the water. Abu Dawood has, "One should not take a bath in it from sexual impurity." What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the explanation of the first riwayah. I'm going to give you the explanation of the first narration. That is the narration of Imam Muslim, narrated Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "None of you should take a bath in stagnant water while he is sexually impure." Muslim reported it. Up until that point. Now, this is page 20. Page 20, hadith number 5. Narrated Abu Hurairah, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "None of you should take a bath in stagnant water while he is sexually impure." Muslim reported it. One of the things that's a point of benefit concerning hadith, you see that there are different riwayat. There are different avenues of this narration. You have one being reported with the wording for Muslim. Then you have another wording of this narration coming from Al-Bukhari. Then you have another wording of this narration coming from Abu Dawood. Regardless of the channels of the narration, what is common practice? What is commonly understood? When you see that there is no distinct mentioning of another narrator for these narrations, Abu Huraira is the narrator of all of them. He's narrating the narration of Muslim. He's narrating the narration of Al-Bukhari. He's narrating the narration of Abu Dawood. If such is not the case, the Sheikh will tell you. You will say, "Wali Abi Dawood an Abi Sa'id al-Khudri." And he will say, "And for Abu Dawood, from the narration of Abu Sa'id," letting you know it's coming from another narrator. What is afforded to you, this is from the science of hadith, is that in the etiquettes, the individual that is narrating the first narration, unless distinctively, specifically mentioned otherwise, he narrates the remaining narrations. Kullu. Kullu. As you've seen with the previous narration, on Abi Umama al-Bahili, you had a version of that narration that came from Ibn Majah. You had a version of that narration that came from Al-Bayhaqi. They both come from Abu Umama al-Bahili. If the narration of Ibn Majah differed from the narration of Al-Bayhaqi in terms of the Rawi, who's narrating the narration, it's upon the Shaykh to tell you and clarify to you. That's the manner of the etiquette from the science of hadith. We're mentioning that because if there is something of deviation from that, if there is shift from that, this is something that the scholars, they will say, he forgot to mention that that narration isn't the narration of Abu Huraira. The narration of Abu Dawood is the narration of Hakada and so forth. But that's not the case here. But this is what's standard. So the person may say, yeah, Abu Huraira, he narrated the narration of Muslim, But who narrated that narration of Al-Bukhari and Abu Dawood? Abu Hurairah as well. Until told otherwise, he narrates everything that he's going to present. That's just something to keep in mind moving forward. So with this narration now, as I've mentioned to you, leading up to the hadith of Qullataini, it deals with the discussion of water itself for water itself. Water itself being pure. Water itself being pure, nothing impurifying it. Water itself being pure, nothing impurifying it except impurities that change it. Taste, color, and smell from within inside of it. Water itself, if it reaches a specific measurement, cannot hold impurity. The discussion up until this point, the focus has been about water itself for itself, not outside of the water. Sheikh Fawzan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he says, concerning this hadith and moving forward, this hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, هذا الحديث موضوعه بيان الماء الذي تحول عن أصله. This narration, its topic matter is clarifying the water that has changed and shifted from its basis. سبق في الحديث الذي قبله أن الماء إذا تحول عن أصله بنجاسة غيرت أحد أوصافه الثلاثة إما ريحه وإما طعمه وإما لونه أنه يكون نجسا بإجماع أهل العلم. Sheikh Fawzan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he says, it has already preceded in the hadith, the narration before this, that if water changes from its basis by impurity and is changed in one of its three qualities, whether it is the smell or scent, whether it is the taste, or whether it is the color, it becomes najis, it becomes impure itself, bi-ijma'i ahli al-ilm, by consensus amongst the scholars. وفي هذا الحديث, and he mentions in this particular hadith, بيان نوع آخر من أنواع التحول. He's going to clarify for you another category from the categories of the water changing. So this narration and the narrations moving forward, they are going to clarify for you another means of the water changing from the various ways of how water can change. So far, we presented something concerning water changing by impurity, binajasatin, tahduthu fi, by impurities that are now taking place and occurring inside of the water. That was a change. It was an avenue of change. The Sheikh is saying, now we're going to shift. What are we shifting? We're shifting on how we're seeing the water change from another avenue now. So there is going to be tahawwal. There is going to be change. There is going to be taghayyur. There is going to be change or alteration. But it's going to be min anwa' tahawwal, another avenue of water changing or transitioning or shifting. وهو الماء الذي استعمل في غسل الجنابة, and it is the water that is utilized and used for the washing of the individual that is junub. والماء الذي وقع فيه بول من الآدام, and it is the water that has now been encountered or subject to the urine of mankind. So the Sheikh, he's mentioning now, this narration is, and the narrations coming thereafter, their subject matter is going to be about how the water can change from different avenues. The water that is subject to change by an individual that is junub taking a bath in that water. There is a discussion amongst the people of knowledge concerning it, and it's going to come. So he's giving you a heads up. He's alerting you. The narrations that have previously been presented, Their discussion was about water being changed from a specific avenue. Now the focus is going to be about water changing from another avenue. The avenue of an individual that is junub, taking a bath with water. What is the understanding of that remaining water? Or the water of an individual, mankind, male or female, that has urinated in the water. The narrations that are going to come are going to address this tahawwul, this change or alteration, or if you would like, taghayyur, the change that is from the wording of the narration of Al-Bayhaqi. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, in the narration where it mentions, لا يقتصل أحدكم, do not let any one of you, أحدكم, linguistically, this is speech that is directed to the men and is understood by kum, this domirul muttasil, this pronoun, if you would say, that's attached. Ahadukum, any one of you. You say, well, who are you speaking to? In the Arabic language, linguistically, you're speaking to a group of men. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, هذا خطاب للرجال. He said, this is speech that is addressed to the men. واعلم أن أكثر خطاب القرآن والسنة موجه للرجال. He says, know and understand that the majority of the address and the direction from the Quran and the Sunnah is directed towards the men. لأن الرجال هم وعاة العلم, because the men, they are the carriers of the knowledge. ورعاة الأمة, and they are the guardians and the drivers or the directors of the ummah. They are the administrators and governors of the ummah. ولهذا تجد أكثر خطابات في القرآن والسنة. And for this reason, you will find that the majority of the address or the speech that is in the Quran and the Sunnah, موجهة إلى الرجال. It is directed towards the men. وتدخل النساء تبعا للرجال. And this is the importance of why I mentioned this specific point of benefit from this hadith. And he says that وَتَدْخُلُ النِّسَاء, and that the women, they follow entering into it after the men. We previously gave you from Usul al-Fiqh, from that work Al-Waraqat, whether from the explanation of Sheikh Mashhur Hassan Ali Salman or anyone else from the people of knowledge, that when you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, huwa khitabun lin-nabi wa khitabun li-ummah. It is an address for the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, and it is also an address at the same time for the ummah. Illa bi dalilin, except or unless there is proof that shows that's just for the Messenger. Other than that, the general address from the Quran and the Sunnah, whatever is addressed to the Messenger, it addresses the ummah as well, the men and the women. After that, whatever is addressed to the believers, linguistically, that addresses them specifically, the women follow enter into that address as well, following subsequently thereof. Linguistically, they're not addressed specifically. They fall under the understanding of the rulings itself, because linguistically, you could utilize the group for men, also including women. It's not a prohibition. And it's not, if you would say, a rule, a governing rule, that when you are utilizing the group form of men when being spoken to that women can't be entertained linguistically. We say, no, that's not even the case. We say, no, that's not the case. So we understand that which is addressed to the messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, it addresses the ummah at the same time. No difference between the two, unless there's text. Whatever is directed to the men at the same time, it addresses the women, unless there's text. Whatever is addressed to the women is just for the women, unless there's going to be something else. Me personally, offhand, I don't even know of anything that is addressed to the women that subsequently comes back to the men taba'an, that we follow them after that by text that would say, no, in general, specifically, it mentioned them, but it mentions us as well from a different avenue. Me personally, I don't know anything offhand at this particular time that would reference that particular discussion. So address for the messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, is address for the ummah at the same time, no difference, unless there's text. In this statement, لا يغتسل أحدكم, an individual surface value may look at it and say, being ظاهري, Abu Dawud ظاهر, just takes things surface value. And you're going to see within these narrations how taking narrations surface value without in-depth examination and review can lead you to a imbalance, if you would say. And at that time, I'm going to present to you some of the statements of the people of knowledge that they mention concerning that position of being dhahir, when you're too staunch on it. There is a position that some of the people of knowledge, they have gotten to a stance that they have said with this one particular scholar, this position that he has on these narrations that we've just read, that they are the most, not to say disgusting, but these are the most, how would we say? No. It's like if you have a position based off of how you see the text, and you say, I'm just going off of that which is mantuq. The narration mentioned, لا يبولن أحدكم في الماء الدائم الذي لم يجري ثم يغتسل فيه. The narration, as you're going to see, it's going to come. The narration of Al-Bukhari. Do not let any one of you urinate in the water and then take a bath inside of it. And then you come behind and say, the narration said, don't urinate, I can defecate in it. And we say, okay, you've taken this to such a level. Out of the positions that you've had, the people of knowledge will say, this is the one that really, like, it irks us the most. Not, the position is of excessiveness, but the word that I was looking for is the motive, it's the position in return that the people of knowledge have for that particular position on that particular scholar. Where they say now, this is the position that I'm just going to, this is the position that we have the most disdainment with you over. Out of all the positions that you've taken, this is the one that we have the most and the greatest disdain with you over. Saying that an individual could defecate in the water, but he couldn't urinate. I mean, he could defecate in the water, but he can't urinate because the mantuq of the narration says, La yabulanna ahadukum. And you say, oh, that means he can defecate. What's the illah? What's the reason behind not urinating applies to the defecation? With those that have that line of thought. But it's the critique that they have for that particular position. But that's something from these particular wordings of the narration that's going to come along the line in time, inshallah ta'ala. And we're going to present you the statements of the people of knowledge concerning that viewpoint and focus of narration, just being dhahir. And if it said, don't urinate inside of it, that means as well, I can urinate inside of a cup and then pour it inside. Hmm?
It's like, in other words, another person is putting something into, they're putting their own, something out of their own
You
life
might say
into
that.
it,
This is
but
this.
there's nothing there
There's nothing there that says it.
substantive.
But what are they basing their position off of? They say, I govern myself with the Quran and the Sunnah 100%. And if it said urine, I stop at urine 100%. I don't go beyond it. And we say that there are reasonings behind rulings and regulations that extend beyond sometimes what is mentioned in the narration. The Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, he tells a companion, he asks him, he complained to him about what he finds inside of his stomach while he's praying, the uneasiness. لا ينصرف حتى يسمع صوتا أو يجد ريحا. Do not leave until you've heard a sound, or you smell, or you sense a smell. The person says, well, if I don't hear nothing, or if I don't smell nothing, I'm good. And we say, he's giving you examples. Until you know for certain by smell, until you know for certain by hearing. We're not just saying those are the only two examples. Merely, this is it. Nothing else beyond that. Because there is something that an individual, he may sense from himself and understand. Yes, I've lost my purification. But because I didn't smell and because I didn't hear, I'm going off the mantuq, that which is dhahir from the narration. Everything else is outside the window because the narration don't tell me that. You want to say, Akhi, you've gotten too staunch. You've gotten too staunch with being dhahir over that which is mantuq from the narration. You have to understand there are other elements to entertain. This is why there is a mafhum to this narration. They didn't just stop at that which is mantuq. And they said, well, what about what is lesser than that? Okay, stop with it. People stop and say, no. There is a mafhum. There is a level of understanding that if it mentions this, there is an understanding that is accompanying that understanding without being said at the same time. But to just be so staunch, an individual will say, the narration that we just read mentions you can't urine, but I can defecate. You say, where you get that? The mantuq. They are, but they're matching that understanding to you by text. They're saying, their argument is saying, why are you going beyond what the text says? The text says urine. Why are you entertaining defecating? And we're saying because there is an illah there is a reasoning behind the urination inside of the water that is still present if you defecate. It impurifies the water. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, to continue that discussion, he says there is a subtle defense for this scholar to a degree, because urine, it mixes and influences with the water directly. Feces is gelled, it's a compound. It doesn't have that same effect. It's possible it may not change the water. So Sheikh Uthaymeen, he said, yes, there. We're looking for an argument, a defense. How could he have such a staunch position? He said, yes, there is a view, there is a wajh, that it is possible to see where he's seeing this position from. Not just, oh, I'll defecate because you said don't urinate. It's the level of understanding inside of the scholar. However, yet, in totality, the general body of scholars, they were looking at this and they're saying, this particular position of this scholar, this is the one that we are most in disdain of. Because there are other positions that they say, how could he have this as a mokif? How could he hold this as a position, as a ruling? But it's the indifference that's on a lower level. When it came to this, they said this, if you would say in terms of cliche, they said, this is the one that takes the cake. This is the one you've gone too far, basically. But he's looking at it from a particular wajh. And this is why with the scholars that see that madhab, they say you cannot become too extreme, however your line of fiqh is. Because they mention he has some strong points with other issues that Shaykh Uthaymeen says, I find the haqq with him and not with the rest of the scholars. but you cannot, no matter what the subject matter is, you cannot become too extreme. There is the balance. Even when we were dealing with the affair of the salat and the placing of the hands on the chest after ruku'. And Sheikh al-Albani, rahimahullah, he said it's a bid'ah. He said it's an innovation. Sheikh Abdullah al-Bassam, he followed behind that position of Sheikh al-Albani, rahimahullah, and he said he's gone too far. That was the pushback from Sheikh Abdullah al-Bassam. He said, we love the Sheikh. We respect the Sheikh. And in his explanation of Bulug Maram, he quotes the position of Sheikh al-Albani to support positions. But he said, with this issue, the Sheikh has gone too far. Because they look at it as an affair of ijtihad. An individual being able to legitimately deduce, derive, and conclude positions, not having a direct text. Because there's no ijtihad, ma'a wujud al-nas. There's no ijtihad if there's a text present. Which means what? There is no narration that is sahih and sarih by that which is mantuq. Mantuq goes hand in hand with that which is sarih. It tells you. We don't need another narration. We don't have to dig and dive and examine inside the narration. This will let you know that there is no narration that is sahih, authentic, and sarih, that is clear, that tells you, put your hands on your chest after raising from ruku'. It's an issue of difference because how they see the issue inside of other texts. Nothing authentic, nothing clear at the same time, telling you when you raise from ruku', put your hands on your chest. Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, is his position. He holds it as an issue of ijtihad. Sheikh bin Baz, these are issues of ijtihad with the scholars. Sheikh al-Albani, he says, there's no text for this. It's an act of ibadah, it's innovation. But with Sheikh Abdullah al-Bassam, he says, this is an innovation. Despite our love for Sheikh al-Albani and reverence for him and understanding his level of knowledge with the science of hadith, says on this particular topic, his position, we feel he has gone too far to label it and classify it as an innovation. But the khitab in this narration that is addressed to the men is, what time is the adhan? Is addressed to the men, but the women, they follow inside of it. He says, وَقَوْلُهُ فِي الْمَاءِ الدَّائِمِ, meaning do not let any of you urinate in stagnant water. Sheikh Uthaymeen, he says, أي الذي لا يجري, this is water that does not run. لأنه ساكن لا يتحرك, this is water that is sitting still, it doesn't move. فهو دائم, it is constant and it stays. وقوله, and his statement, وهو جنب, and this individual is in sexual impurities. He says, يعني والحال أنه جنب, and the condition or case of that individual is that he is in sexual impurity.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
طيب, I'm looking at the calendar for Ramadan, and it appears Maghrib is about 7:20ish, if you would say, on average, towards the initiation of it. So we're going to go with 6 o'clock, if we can, to just focus on a start time, if we can, Adam. Six, because our next class will be during the month of Ramadan, if I'm seeing my calendar correct, right? So for the month of Ramadan, our classes again, they're on Sunday, and we're going to pinpoint, we're going to isolate, shoot for a starting time of 6 o'clock, 6 p.m., 6 p.m. Because it looks like as we move forward, the time is going to get a little bit later, and if we need to shift, then we'll shift. But it's only going to be 4 classes at the same time, maximum. Then from there, we will figure where we're going to go. At that time, we're going to be getting into the summer months and so forth. Whether we're going to stay on Sunday or a weekend or a weekday, entertaining weekdays, now we have to be after business hours, of course, if we want to be here present, if we would say. So asking now, if it was hypothetically after Ramadan, during a business day, weekday, Monday through Friday, any of the days, what time frame would work? Would it be, again, an hour before Maghrib? Or would it be Bayna Maghrib wal Isha, between Maghrib and Isha?
Sundays,
1 hour before Maghrib?
no, daytime.
In the daytime still? Okay, Tayyib. Um, I'm moving forward looking for what is going to shift my scheduling in terms of children. Normally, my younger children, they go away with family during the summertime. That allows for me to work. That's why I keep this class on Sunday. I don't try to entertain working overtime during this particular time. So moving forward, if other avenues open up in terms of work at my job, it may cause me to shift it so that I could be at work on Sunday, but then have more opportunity for class Monday through Friday. So it depends. I'm still open. I'm still open, and we'll govern ourselves moving forward. But at this point, this is why even during the month of Ramadan, I say let's stay with Sunday because we're used to it. Let's stay consistent. Let's not get too far. Let's not go for Thursday an hour before. And we say that's totally opposed to what we've been doing. Between what time?
Sheikh Naeem does a class for Tuesday and Thursday from Margaret to Isha on Tuesday and Thursday.
But if we were Tuesdays and Thursdays, what if we led up to Maghrib? Hypothetically, before his class,
Between Asha.
1 hour before Maghrib.
Okay, that might work.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If it's going to be during the weekday, I think it's either an hour before Maghrib or it's between Maghrib and Isha, with the exclusion of Naeem's class, of course, because the time is already occupied.
Because even when the time advances, I don't know if he wants to stay between Margaret
The time advances.
You know, like when Margaret gets late.
That's November though, right? Somewhere around November. Daylight savings time.
So I know, like now,
That's what you're referring to, isn't it, Sheikh?
still getting late.
Oh, you're just talking about the general extending of the day.
Right.
Oh,
So I don't know how he might work that.
between Maghrib and Isha is not desired except for certain elements. It's not for me. It's not the desired time frame. In the summertime, moving forward, because people are getting out late. People want to be with their families. Um, there's other things that take place that have to take place for some people's lives that you say, let's not inconvenience them, but let's afford them the opportunity with ease at the same time. Because other things will still come up. It will still may be issues of weather, activities in the masjid, health, or whatever may also intervene with it at the same time. So at this point, we'll stay on Sunday, and after Ramadan, we'll come back to Sunday, and if there is a fluctuation, it would probably be with the time, if had to be. But on Sundays, more than likely, I don't see that being the case. If it was during the weekdays, that's more of a conversation that's entertained. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته